Hello everyone and welcome back to Closet Gaming. Today we're going to take a look at Shadowbug. This action platformer promises to bring an interesting movement mechanic, handcrafted levels, and emphasis on speedrunning. It will soon be available on Steam for €4.99 or your regional equivalent. So before I go into the review, I feel like I should disclose the fact that I've been given this game for free by the developer. I understand this might make me a bit biased to a degree, but I do try to be as impartial as I can. And even though it's pretty much the standard for the industry for critics to get the games for free, this one is one of the first times this has happened to me. So keep that fact in mind as I got this for free. And now let's get straight into the review. Shadowbug is a very fast-paced platforming game that tries to introduce a very different style of movement. And this is the very core mechanic of the game, because a lot of the movement isn't actually done by using the keys as you might be used to from normal platformer games. Instead, here a lot of the movement is done through attacking. And attack a lot you will. And not only blindly attack, you will need to time your attacks to avoid getting killed by the environment of the game, plan their order to solve puzzles and strategize your way through the levels. And yes, this mechanic is for sure the most interesting thing about Shadowbug. And while the fact that a lot of the movement is done through the attacks is certainly something that we don't see used often in platformers, it brought an interesting issue from my point of view. Because you're forced to focus on where exactly you're attacking at every single point of the game, because otherwise you might just die to the environment around you. It also means that the combat itself becomes somewhat simplistic. Except for boss fights and a few enemy types, the enemies don't really engage in fighting you. They work more like points you just click to move further in the level rather than actual enemies. The only types of enemies that do actually pose a bit of a challenge when it comes to the actual combat are the enemies that fire projectiles at you. And since I touched at the bosses, I guess this is a good time as any to talk about them a bit more. There are 6 bosses in the game, each after roughly 5 levels, and by the way there are 36 levels in total. And I'm more than glad to inform that the bosses do actually feel really awesome. They feature interesting and unique mechanics, well, unique compared to the rest of the game, and gradually pick up in difficulty, never making you feel like the previous boss has been so much harder than the boss you're currently fighting at the moment. Apart from the movement / combat mechanic, the game is a pretty generic platformer. Just jump around, trying to find a path, solve a few puzzles along the way, and mainly, have fun while doing all of this. I do wish the combat was a bit more involved, but I also understand that that would most likely make the movement feel really weird, and maybe not even work in the way it works currently, and I do like the movement a lot. So, since there isn't much else to talk about when it comes to the mechanics of the game, let's now talk about the game's graphics, and I will say, they are pretty stunning. Maybe not so cheerful as you might be used to from a lot of other platformers, but they are certainly beautiful. Similarly to Seabay, another game I recently reviewed, they use a single color, in this case black, for everything you can interact with, and the rest of the level is actually animated and colorful. Compared to a lot of other platformers, the colors are a bit more cold and darker, not really bright and cheerful, making the whole game feel sort of, well, dark. And this is certainly intentional, as while the game doesn't really explain the story to you in a really obvious way, you just get it over time, and the graphical themes do really fit that story well. And since I just touched on the story, I can probably tell you guys a bit about it. As I said, the story doesn't really explain to you by any text or cutscenes. The most information about the story you will get apart from the actual gameplay and the levels are these few images you get at the start of the levels. I won't spoil the story for you guys because just even going to the very basic theme would create major spoilers, but I will say this. I really like the fact that most of the story is presented through the gameplay. I do wish more games would do that. And now it's time to talk about the last tool used to create atmosphere in games, the music. And I'm more than happy to report that the soundtrack of Shadowbug is really good. I do wish there was a little bit more variety between the levels. There is a bit of variety, but I do feel that if there was a bit more of it, it would have been even better. Performance-wise, the game ran smooth, and I didn't even experience any bugs or crashes. And remember, I didn't even have a release version, so the real release version should work even better. So, in conclusion, Shadowbug is a fun platformer with a very interesting mechanic for movement. Graphically it's pretty impressive, but it is also pretty short. It took me about 3 hours to fully finish the game, and I'm not even that great at platformers. Luckily, the game is priced very well for the amount of time you will get out of it. So if you like platformers but you want to try a bit of a different approach to them, Shadowbug is a great choice for you. And even if you aren't that into platformers, you might find liking Shadowbug precisely because of the fact that the movement system isn't really what you see in most of them. So that's it for today, guys. Hope you liked the review, and if you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel, and comment if you have something you would like to add. See you guys later with more gaming content.